Dear students, the other day I have shown you the vertebral column and different vertebra in different regions of the vertebral column. So what are those regions of the vertebral column? They are the cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral and coccygeal regions. And among these vertebrae, we will be studying the typical vertebra. Typical vertebra is the thoracic vertebra, especially one in the middle region of the thorax. Then the vertebrae, which is plural, vertebra is singular. They show regional variations in their size, shape and characteristic features. There are certain features shared by all the vertebra, and the typical vertebra, as I told you, is the thoracic vertebra of mid-thoracic region. What you are observing is the vertebral column, which is showing the various curvatures. What are those curvatures of the vertebral column? These are the natural curves of the vertebral column. So what are they? They are in the cervical region. You call it as the cervical curvature. In the thoracic region, thoracic curvature. In the lumbar region, lumbar curvature. And you are seeing the sacral curvature. And if you see the thoracic curvature, it shows concavity ventrally. And the height of this thoracic vertebral column is about 30 centimeters. Then how many thoracic vertebra? There are 12 in number, and all of them are not typical in their features. Some majority are typical. So what are those vertebra? They are the second to 8th vertebra are typical vertebra, whereas the others, that is the first thoracic vertebra and 9th to 12th thoracic vertebra, are atypical. So the typical thoracic vertebra are any vertebra from 2nd to 8th. The atypical or the thoracic vertebra 1 and 9 to 12 vertebra. Now we are considering only the typical vertebra. Atypical vertebra we will deal separately. And you know the parts of a vertebra which I have shown you in the specimen are the body of the vertebra, and you are seeing the transverse processes, the spinous process and superior articular processes, and the pedicle, the laminae you are seeing. This is the side view of the thoracic vertebra, where you can see the body and the facets for the ribs on the lateral surface of the body, and the transverse process showing the impression or the costal facet for the tubercle of the rib, and this is the spinous process, and you are seeing the articular process, superior articular process. Now let us see the features of a typical vertebra, which is thoracic vertebra. It consists of a body, the vertebral arch and the processes which you are seeing here. The body is anterior solid part and it transmits the body weight. Then posteriorly you are seeing the vertebral arch which surrounds the vertebral canal. This is the vertebral canal, and which contains the spinal cord with its covering meninges. And the vertebral arch consists of pedicles that are projecting from the body, and then the pedicles. From the pedicles you are seeing posteriorly the two laminae which are going posteriorly, and they will unite and form the arch. So the vertebral arch is formed by the posterior surface of the body of the vertebra, the pedicles on either side, and posteriorly you are seeing the laminae. Then when you see the processes, there is a pair of transverse processes laterally and a single spinous process going posteriorly, which is formed by the fusion of the two laminae, and then you are seeing a pair of superior articular processes, and there will be a pair of inferior articular processes. So which are these processes are seen at the junction of the pedicles with the laminae. The total processes are 7 in number, of which 3 are paired and 1 unpaired. The unpaired is the spinous process. The paired are the transverse processes, superior articular processes, and inferior articular processes. Now, let us see the parts of a typical vertebra. So, this is the superior surface of the vertebra you are seeing, and let us see the parts. One is the body. Observe it in the figure. So, now you could identify the body of a vertebra. Then, where are the pedicles? So, this is the place where you can see the pedicles. Then the laminae. So, these are the two lamina which are fusing and forming the spine. Then what is vertebral arch or neural arch? So, you can see the encircled one, that is the vertebral arch or neural arch formed by the posterior surface of the body, the pedicles, and the laminae of the vertebra. And then what is vertebral foramen? You can see the vertebral foramen which is shown by arrow, and through which traverses the spinal cord and the meninges covering it. Then there is a single spinous process. So it is the spinous process. Then the paired processes. Two transverse processes will be there, and then the 4 articular processes, a pair of superior articular processes and a pair of inferior articular processes, which you cannot see in this view because this is a superior surface view. Now let us consider vertebral bodies. They are also known as centrum. They are disc shaped in cross section and they vary in size in different regions. So there is a gradual increase in the size of these vertebral bodies from above downwards up to lumbar 5 vertebra, because increased weight bearing will be there at lower levels. After L5, the width decreases rapidly towards the coccyx. Here you can see the regional differences in vertebra. See the bodies of vertebra in the cervical, thoracic and lumbar regions, which is increasing as it is coming towards the lumbar region, and you can see the vertebral foramen size in the cervical, thoracic and lumbar regions, and then you can see the laminae, the pedicles and the spine, which shows the differences in the cervical, thoracic and lumbar regions. Similarly, in the transverse processes also you will find the differences in these regions, Additional, you can see a foramen in the transverse process of the cervical vertebra. That is one identification point for the cervical vertebra. And then the articular processes also show differences region wise. But in the present class, we will consider only the typical thoracic vertebra. You see the typical thoracic vertebra, the body is heart-shaped, and in the case of left side of the vertebrae, it shows a notch for the descending thoracic aorta, and there will be intervertebral discs between the vertebra. So 1/4 of total length of thoracic vertebral region is contributed by the intervertebral discs. So the parts of the typical thoracic vertebra, now you are familiar. The body, the pedicles, the transverse processes, the articular processes, the laminae, and the spinous process posteriorly. Now, see the body is heart-shaped. That means it's almost equal in anteroposterior and transverse diameters. On each side, if you see the side view of it, it presents two demi-facets. They are called the costal facets. So superior and inferior costal demi-facets will be seen on typical vertebra, that is T2 to T8 vertebra. So the superior demi-facet will be at the upper border of the body near the pedicle. The inferior facet is near the lower border of the body near the inferior vertebral notch. So this is the inferior vertebral notch. So these facets are for the ribs. Then focus on the vertebral foramen, which is small and rounded. The pedicles are going straight backwards, and they have a notch, the pedicle above, that is the superior vertebral notch, and inferiorly, that is the inferior vertebral notch. So observe the difference between the superior vertebral notch, which is shallow, and the inferior vertebral notch, which is deep and more conspicuous. Then there is a pair of superior and a pair of inferior articular processes, and if you observe their directions, the superior processes will be directed upwards and laterally, whereas the inferior are slightly medially directed. Now in this picture, you can see the two vertebrae placed one above the other, and you can see the bodies of the vertebra, and this space between the two vertebral bodies is occupied by intervertebral disc in the living. So in this picture you can see the intervertebral disc, and along the lateral surfaces of the body you are seeing the superior costal facets near the upper border, and this is the inferior costal facet. Similarly, for this vertebra also, you are seeing the superior and inferior costal facets. Then coming to this is the transverse process of the vertebra, and you can see the spinous process and the superior articular process you are seeing, and then this will be the region of the inferior articular process. Then you can see the intervertebral foramen. This is the intervertebral foramen, superior vertebral notch and inferior vertebral notch. So the inferior and superior, these together contributing for the formation of the intervertebral foramen. Now you can quickly go through the parts of the typical vertebra seen from the inferior surface. So one is the body, the pedicles, the lamina, the vertebral or neural arch, the vertebral foramen, spinous process, transverse processes, the articular processes. Because this is the inferior view, we are seeing the inferior articular processes. These are the inferior articular processes. And you can identify from the superior surface. So the superior articular processes. Otherwise, the parts are the same which you have seen on the inferior surface. This is the side view. You can identify the body and then the articular processes, superior and inferior, the spinous process. So in this it is marked the inferior articular processes. From the side view also you can identify the superior surface of body and then the articular processes, superior and inferior articular processes, transverse process, and you can see prominently the costal facet on the transverse process, and you can observe the spinous process. So the body is heart shaped and anterior location. Then, so it is in the form of a short cylinder having a flat upper and lower surfaces. So articulating with the adjoining vertebra separated by intervertebral disc, which you can observe here, the intervertebral discs between the bodies of the vertebra. This is the anterior surface of the vertebra. And then you can observe the pedicles and then their junction with the laminae, and at that junction the various processes, paired processes, fused laminae forming the single spinous process. So what is pedicle and lamina? Okay, how the lamina go posteriorly and meet at the middle. And you can see the formation of the vertebral arch by the posterior surface of the body of the vertebra, and then the pedicles and then the laminae, all together forming the vertebral arch. And you can see how the vertebral foramen is formed by the pedicles, the laminae and body. And this is the spinous process, which is an extension from the fused laminae, and it projects downwards. The spinous process projects downwards. And you can see the articulated vertebra with intervertebral discs between the bodies, and you can see the spinous processes which are directed downwards and backwards and are long. The 5th to 9th spines are the longest and they overlap each other. You see the transverse process. So they are passing laterally and slightly downwards from the junction of pedicle and lamina. This is the transverse process. And anterior surface of the transverse process presents the costal facets close to the tip. This is the tip. And these costal facets on the transverse processes or for the tubercle of the rib of the corresponding number. Then the upper 6 will be concave and they are anterolateral in direction, whereas the lower, that is the 7th to 10th, the costal facets on the transverse process, they are flat and they face upwards, forwards and laterally. Then projecting upwards and laterally from the pedicle is the superior articular process, and downwards or inferiorly is the inferior articular process, and each of these processes, superior and inferior articular processes, they have smooth articular facets. And you can see the costal facets on the sides of the body. Superior is a demi-facet near the upper border, nearer to the pedicle, and inferior demi-facet nearer to the lower border, nearer to vertebral notch, that is the inferior vertebral notch, and a costal facet on the transverse process. And you can see here in the bone, the costal facets you are seeing in relation with the bodies of the vertebra and in relation with the transverse process. Then vertebral notch. So pedicle is narrow in vertical diameter than that of the body. So there is a deep inferior vertebral notch between the body and pedicle. So superior vertebral notch is shallow. Now you can see here the vertebra kept one above the other with intervertebral discs, and you can see a probe passing through the foramen. What is this foramen? This is the intervertebral foramen. You are seeing it between the pedicles of adjacent vertebra. You are seeing. Okay, this is the inferior vertebral notch and the superior vertebral notch. So through the intervertebral foramen passes the spinal nerves. You can see in this. You are seeing the spinal cord in the vertebral canal, and you can see the ventral and dorsal roots coming, and then there is the position of the dorsal root ganglion, which will be placed in the intervertebral foramina. Okay, so now you have learnt about the typical vertebra, that is the thoracic vertebra. The general features only we have learnt, the attachments of ligaments, then the muscular origin, all those things we will learn after you are thorough with the features of a typical vertebra.